How much is Sadiq Khan spending on his new diversity training programme for Transport for London?
Oh, here we go again. He's creating an administration in his own image.
Yes.
Of which people, it's nothing to do with their skills or their ability whatsoever. And so he's doing this diversity training thing, which I understand he's going to be spending something like £2.5 million.
He just hates everyone, doesn't he?
Well, we've now got an assembly member. As you know, I stood for Reform UK in London Mayor. And as I say, Alex Wilson is our new assembly member there. And he's actually got inside a sort of a root of what's going on in there. And everything is about diversity. They've got single-sex loos, all the other things that are going on. It's very woke. Everywhere's woke. And the problem is, you know, he's going to continue this. I'm afraid, you know, London has voted for what they're going to deserve, I'm afraid.
I've got to be honest with you, when I worked at City Hall, every Friday afternoon I used to perform an unpolitically correct song which I'd written during the week, and they kept threatening to send me on diversity training, and I kept threatening to go. Oh no,
That's always fixed characteristics, isn't it? It's never diversity of thought. And it was 3 or 4 years ago that the previous government discovered that unconscious bias training does not work.
Yeah.
It's been proved not to work. In fact, it does the opposite.
Yeah.
It can make things worse. So £2.5 million now. Over 4 years, I think it's going to be.
Now, I'm not suggesting that people do this, but I've got a friend of mine who, when they brought in the diversity quotas for the Metropolitan Police, you know, if you stop one person who's black, you've got to stop 2 people who are white or whatever. He always self-defined himself as a Vietnamese boat person because he believed that, in all likelihood, that would mean that he'd have to find 500,000 other people.
Well, this is the thing. The mayor's on such a spending spree at the moment. He wants 500 million a year just for TfL, which I think is staggering, and he wants to increase the annual budget for London up to now. I think it's going to be £25 billion. That is absolutely astounding. And then, you know, he's going to cry poverty that he hasn't got enough money to do anything. And this is what he's choosing to spend the money on. This is the thing that annoys me the most about this diversity, equity, and inclusion training is, like you say, it's been proven not to work. It's incredibly expensive, and it's just a grift. I'm sorry. Like I know you joke around about saying you turn up, but I mean, most
I'd love
to.
to.
But this is the thing. The things, when I've gone to them, we get an email basically before saying, just sign what they tell you to sign so we could say we've done it and we can all go back to work. You know, most big companies do it because they don't actually care about it.
Pete, I would go and engage fully.
Yeah.
You know, when they said the City Hall once threatened to send me on a 1-week diversity training with Lee Jasper, I was looking forward to it.
No, I
really would.
But these organisations keep coming up as well. The ones who give this training, they come up with new versions. I think you can almost take any of the buzzwords like sort of anti-racism, allyship, LGBTQ, gender this, gender that, put them together. You've got a new course. And so they're just repackaging and repackaging and charging for it.
This one is specialising in microaggressions, apparently.
What
the hell is that?
I don't know, but it sounds painful.
What I don't understand, it can't be important because it's a microaggression.
It's a microaggression.
Macroaggressions I can understand.
Like
microaggressions.
And we mustn't forget there's something like over 1,000 executives earning 6 figures.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things where most of them are in
I genuinely feel like I'm on the wrong side of this argument because I could have made a fortune by now.
The problem is, though, with Transport for London, as far as I'm concerned, you can disagree with me if you like. I think that it's destroying transport in London because it's effectively the tube bosses eliminating other forms of transport, specifically roads.
Road transport. You're absolutely right. Spot on. And this, you know, as you know, I've been fighting like mad regarding the emissions issues. And we know that ULEZ has made no difference whatsoever to the air quality you breathe. You go down to the tube, it's 2,000% worse down there than what you breathe in.
In the words of Margaret Thatcher, you les if you want to, the lady.
Well, I'll have to use that one.
It's amazing, though, isn't it? Because if they really cared about pollution, they wouldn't deliberately create all the traffic jams.
Well, that's
I'll tell you, Howard, I remember sitting in a meeting with Transport for London, and we said, if you put this particular bus lane in, it's going to cause gridlock on the North Circuit. And they went, yes, but that's not the only advantage of the bus lane. Well, what do you mean? Sorry, that's not the only disadvantage. Right. Went, no, that's not the only advantage. It is our policy to ensure that there are traffic jams to discourage people from driving. Well, of course, you're choking kids by doing it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we've got cycle lanes. Just take Park Lane. There's 2 cycle lanes. There's already one in the park next to it, and they put another one in Park Lane and then brought it down to 20 mile an hour.
And it's so dangerous to pedestrians. Just crossing the road outside where I live, I've got to look left and right on the pavement first because there are cyclists going up now.
Yeah.
Then there's a cycle
Have you
lane.
got floating bus stops?
Yes.
You've got
so
those
you've
as
then
well.
got
Floating
you've got a
bus
bus
I don't
stop
know
on the
what
other
it's
side of a cycle lane in the middle of the road. So the bus comes along, stops, all the passengers debus, and then they have to cross this cycle lane, and the cyclists are not stopping.
No.
So
They're
these
doing 30
cyclists.
mile an hour, above 20 mile an hour.
Horrendous. But it's bad right across the country, isn't it? I've given the example of Greater Manchester, where, you know, if you're on the border between Greater Manchester, Cheshire and Merseyside, they were all on about bringing in a congestion charge. So to drive within that, to drive around Haydock would probably cost about 40 quid a day.
I tell you right now, Andy Burnham told a straight-up lie when he said that I have no plans whatsoever to introduce a congestion charge. The cameras were already up.
I mean, that was great,
it was nothing but a bare-faced lie. And the only reason he didn't do it was he saw what was happening at the time when there was a big protest movement here against it, and it was coming up to his election. And there was a huge move against him, and it was literally, and it sprang up overnight, and literally, I think within about 2 weeks, the policy was, it's never been our policy to have that. That is a categorical lie. Yeah. I mean, how often have we said, if you want to see how Labour were ever going to run this country, look at Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was a blueprint to roll out right across the country.
And this week I've actually launched a campaign, because you probably don't know about this yet, you probably do, certainly the viewers probably do, is that he's launching £4 each way on Blackwall Tunnel.
That's right, the new tunnel tax.
Yeah, and the tunnel tax like that. This is a tunnel that's been up for 110 years and it's always been free to go through. Yeah.
Well,
and he's even taxing EVs to go through.
Well, we're going to have to move on, but I have to say, one of the things that is particularly bad about these mayors across the country are the people, like in places like Slough and Windsor, who have transport organised by Sadiq Khan but are not in London. Yeah. Therefore, he can cut your transport and basically, as he's a little 5-foot hate-filled goblin, he likes having a go at people. Read Bromley. OK, now, you gave an answer to this question, but I'll reread the question anyway. How much has Sadiq Khan spent on his new diversity training programme at Transport for London? You said...
2.5 million.
You are absolutely right. OK, to Tom. The BBC has introduced anti-grooming guidelines warning stars not to abuse their celebrity status. I mean, that's 40 years too late.
Well, I was going to say exactly that. If that's true, it's 50 years too late. I mean, how far do we go back? We've got Jimmy Savile, we've got Rolf Harris. This has been going on for decades. And now they've actually introduced a policy. I mean, we were just talking about equity, diversity and inclusion policy, which we think is an utter waste of money, time. It doesn't work. This might actually be something they might have needed for a while.
I just wonder, though, I mean, I'm not sure I would want anyone in my organisation who you have to go to. Look, just to be clear, do not meet teenagers online and buy pornographic photos from them.
It does feel pretty
most
desperate.
People have guessed that already.
I mean, you shouldn't need this policy, if I'm being honest. This is something that you shouldn't have to do.
It's like when they said the BBC in the end decided that the only under 18s allowed in your dressing room were your own relatives. I mean, how was that not obvious?
I used to do summer camps or help at summer camps. Yeah. We were always given briefings. You know, you're not a bad person, but do not put yourself in a position with a youngster on your own, in a room, even if it's completely innocent. Yeah. Just don't do it.
Yes.
We are in a culture that's more and more concerned with the safety of our young people, more and more concerned with protecting young people. And at the same time, we're more and more a celebrity culture. Yep. And we're failing to understand the ways in which they don't work together. We've got to, if we're going to look after our young people.
I don't know. I mean, I've hung out with Julia Hartley-Brewer, and I'm fairly convinced that she's not buying teen porn.
I mean, it's a celebrity culture that comes at the cost of the other thing that we're meant to cherish more than anything. It's very strange. That
I suppose it's what they call these imbalance of power relationships, isn't it? And I think this seems to be at the heart of a lot of problems. Whether people have actually broken the law or not, I think there is still that kind of, that was just inappropriate for two people of such different age gaps to be as close as they were. And, you know, I think we have to be very careful, about making accusations. But, I mean, if you have very clear evidence, and why aren't you presenting it to people to take forward and to actually press charges and all the rest of it? And why are those people? Because let's be honest, people at the BBC must have known what was going on. I do not believe that nobody in that institution had no idea at all what was going on.
If you look at Harvey Weinstein, now, you know, whatever he did is one thing, but isn't it remarkable the way that all of his victims came forward after he'd sold Miramax and was no longer a significant person in Hollywood. And you've got people who are literally standing up going, Harvey Weinstein was terrible. And there's photos of them saying he's the best guy ever. And I just think it's moral bankruptcy. But what upset me most about Hollywood is where they stood there going, we need to end this rape culture, thinking, we haven't got a problem, it's you.
That is bang on.
But going back,
I tell you, sorry, Howard, that is bang on. The hypocrisy is staggering.
Crazy.
It's crazy. It's actually really insulting. The people running around behaving in this way, then giving me a moral lecture on how terrible it is. I'm sorry, no, that has to stop. The chronic lack of self-awareness in this country and in the world at the moment should be studied for medical science.
I don't know anybody personally who would give an award to someone they know to be a rapist.
Yeah.
It's like, but once again, surely it should be obvious.
And we used to have, I don't want to get nostalgic here, maybe we didn't, I remember it wrong. We used to have really good sort of investigative journalism where people would get this stuff together, they'd take the evidence, they'd bring it together, and then they'd throw out this bombshell documentary. And you think, well, we have too little of that. The balance between that and what's actually going on.
I have to say one thing, and I said this to the Crankies. Isn't it amazing that the one celebrity from the 1970s and 80s who wasn't a pervert was the one who got his wife to dress up as a schoolboy? It's the Crankies. Well, to be fair, well, you got it out your system. Yeah, well, good on you. OK, Tom, has the BBC introduced anti-grooming guidelines? Is it true or is it false?
I fear that this is late but true.
It is absolutely true. OK, to Pete. The RAF's most historic squadron will no longer be called what after claims it is offensive to Muslims?
Oh, God, this story. So the answer is the Crusaders, which when you actually look into it, you think, they might have a point here. So it's based out of Lincolnshire. It's the 14th Squadron. They were formed in 1915, if I remember rightly, and they used to run raids into like Palestine, Gaza, and Egypt in World War I. And one person has complained because they said it's rather culturally insensitive. But what I find interesting is this is not the first time we've had an attack on the Crusader image. I mean, like the Daily Express new owner at one point wanted to get rid of the emblem of the Crusader, and when it was the Qatari World Cup, the FIFA were begging people, please don't go dressed as a Crusader or turn up at the stadium. You know, and so it's interesting how that one is. It seems to be the new one of attack.
But it's amazing, Pete. It's amazing the way that we have forgotten that there were Islamic crusades that got as far as the Netherlands.
We don't talk about that.
If you think about it, the reason a croissant is crescent shape is to celebrate the defeat of the Muslims and the saviour, basically, of France.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but we just don't care about that, do we?
The Siege of Vienna and the Iberian Peninsula and Granada.
So, what's important to notice here, this was the unofficial nickname. So it was something that's really it's a historical name known within the RAF, and it's something that, all the squadrons had names and monikers and things like that. What I find interesting is all it took was one complaint.
Yeah,
one
that's
complaint.
The absurdity of this.
That's the absurdity. Yeah. One person was offended, and a historical name is now wiped. Yeah. And I think that is the problem I have with this story and this situation. It was just all it takes is one person to get offended, and now an entire thing has to change. I think the arrogance.
But this was the Mary Whitehouse thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Which is Mary Whitehouse believed that the standards of television, the standards of society, the standard of our cultural norms should be determined by the most easily offended person in the country. Like, if anybody's offended, and actually just think, you know what, if you really care, I'll tell you the thing that amazes me, though, and I'm not joking. Why on earth has nobody complained about Mecca Bingo? I mean, it's a gambling institution.
I didn't know it was for a long time. I thought it was.
How have I never thought of that?
I asked
because I don't get offended by things.
I asked my mate Asgar, and he said, I think they just don't know what bingo is.
When were the Crusaders? 400 years ago?
Yeah.
500 years ago? How long do we have to worry about this? I mean, are we upsetting the Italians when we talk about Roman Empire?
And when did we actually first use the word crusade?
When did we first use that?
Is that more,
I don't know, actually.
That's an intriguing thing.
It's a good question.
Good question. We used to have Sunday school groups where the little kiddies were called the Crusader group.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens anymore.
I'll tell you what. The most offensive thing, if you want to get offended, this is the thing to get offended. I was reading about tapas, right? I'm not joking. Spanish shops used to give you a small piece of pork and a glass of red wine on entry to confirm you weren't a Muslim. Now that is racist. If ever I heard something, it's like, oh, what a lovely tradition. Just abject racism.
But from a religious perspective, there is an important issue about why it's always Christianity that tends to get cancelled. And obviously this links in with the Olympics that's just happened as well.
Yeah.
But I think, it is again and again does seem to be Christian
You saw the
things.
Last Supper, didn't you?
Yeah, the Last Supper with the drag queens. That was...
And the
I wouldn't mind she was minging as well, wasn't she? Like, if she was like one of the fit ones, that would have been all right, wouldn't it? Like, let's get that big one there. What would you?
You obviously like the Smurf.
Oh, God. But no, Tom, I think you have a point here. It does always seem to be that it's Christianity is the one that is picked on.
Yeah.
And I'm not a religious person in the slightest, but you do see the imbalance. And if everything is easy target, and you could get I have to admit, what I will say though is those who are offended by the drag queens as the Last Supper, I mean, that image has been recreated many, many times with lots of different characters from film and TV and things. So if we're going to get offended by one,
Just look at Monty Python.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, we should be offended by all of it.
Yeah.
But collective outrage is just as bad.
But there are countries and there are religions where they just say, we're just not going to wear it. You know what? If what you want to do is mock the Prophet Muhammad in the Olympic opening ceremony, you know what? We'll just ban the broadcast. And okay, there's always people who talk about terrorism, but Islamic countries have got no problem whatsoever with causing trouble if they see blasphemy knocking about. It's just we don't stand up for our stuff.
No. And I think there is a context debate there with the Last Supper, which is the Olympics was supposed to bring everybody together. That was the thing. It was all of humanity coming together. Oh, except for those who are going to get offended with having a
But isn't the Olympics a celebration of sport?
It's an elitism.
But the one thing you do have to remember, though, is, and this is the bit that was not explained in the opening ceremony, is that Paris has a long history of drag culture. It has very proud, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if it was
Macron's wife
with, good Lord, I was going to say something, and I was like, I'm not going to say it. Yeah. But if it was contextualised like that and said, look, this is to do with this bit of Parisian history and this bit of Parisian culture, fine, I'll go along with it. But the way they did it, it just felt like it was smacked in there, and if you didn't like it, you're the problem. Yeah. And I felt like that.
I think it might have been the worst opening ceremony ever.
Oh my God! I swear to God, it was actually a trick by France to give everybody a cold and flu so they could actually win something.
Well, I heard the new Olympic slogan is no longer highest, fastest, longest, but stop the boats.
They
were just coming and coming and coming.
Anyway, it has been correctly pointed out that given it's now Saturday night, this was a week ago.
More than a week ago.
Okay, so Pete, RAF name that was offensive to Muslims, apparently?
It's the Crusaders.
Absolutely right. And we'll be back straight after this.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
Okay, welcome back. And this is the prize today. Look at this. Breathe deeply. It's Sadiq's new book and it's out in paperback. So, Howard, Labour has been criticised for rebranding illegal migration as irregular migration. Is it true or is it false?
Well, it's interesting, this one, isn't it? I actually had to go into the Oxford English Dictionary to find out what irregular meant. And
it's normally relating to your toilet stops, isn't it?
or verbs.
Well, something like that. But it's basically...
Sorry, Howard, let me just think. I was thinking about faeces, you were thinking about verbs. It just summarises the difference.
I'm with you.
It really is a mixed ability group, isn't it?
This man's very intelligent. I'm not. It's very simplistic for me. A funny shape. That's what it's supposed to mean, an irregular shape. That's what it's about. But, it's funny, isn't it? They come into power, Labour, and they suddenly wanted to say, get rid of the word illegal.
Well, I've got a theory on this, and I don't know if it's going to be proved to be right, but Labour have signed up for this pan-European refugee thing. I think what they will do is they will say, those people coming across the channel on boats are irregular migrants, but those people who've arrived in Italy... and are being transferred as part of the scheme are regular migrants. Yeah. And what they will do is effectively move 100,000 illegal immigrants into sounding like they are genuine. Yeah. That's my conspiracy theory.
I tell you right now, that is 100% correct. This is all nothing but a magic trick. This is look over here, don't look about what's actually happening. And I've been saying, probably since just before the general election that what will happen is an amnesty in all but name.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're starting to see it now. And I have to admit, I did rather like Robert Jenrick's tweet about this, saying you spelt illegal wrong.
Yes.
But also the fact that this was brought in.
You can tell Sam Armstrong's working with him. That's what it sounds, isn't it?
That's what it sounds. But no, you can tell that. Like Labour, I'm trying to rather keep this quiet because it was snuck in on like a Friday afternoon as a policy change. So that usually means that, like, they don't want it to be big news.
But using semantics to, change policy, to make it look cuddly.
It's the vocabulary, controlling your language.
That's the point. This is how these people operate.
But I don't understand, and perhaps some of you or one of you can tell me this. There is no doubt that uncontrolled immigration, the greatest victims are the working class communities, right? Who built the Labour Party.
Yep.
Why does the Labour Party love migration so much?
Because the people who run the Labour Party aren't from those areas anymore.
Yes.
That's the reality. The Labour Party is not the old Labour Party. It's run by Sir Keir Starmer, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But let's be real.
Labour want to be in power for the rest of this century, so they're obviously voting in voters. And they're all going to reduce the election age down to 16. Yeah. All these sorts of things are policies they're bringing by the back door. They used to be a favour of proportional representation.
So has illegal migration been rebranded irregular migration? True or false?
Sadly, I think it's true.
It's absolutely true. OK, on to Tom. Akhmed Yakoob, the Lamborghini lawyer from the Manchester Airport incident, has been signed up by ITV to star in the British version of Law and Order. Is it true or is it false?
There are so many things in that question that I don't understand, but I'm going to try and pick it apart. And
do you not know who he is?
I think is he the lawyer from the Manchester Airport incident?
He sat between the two guys who were guilty.
And was sort of saying we're going to take this all the way, and this was before additional footage came out.
For those of you who like WWF wrestling, it reminded me of the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase running around in his bloody Bentley or whatever. Absolutely. I mean, he's unworthy of the court.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you've got to have all the facts, and before you go public with things, you've got to see both sides of the story, and you are at risk with these things when you comment on the situations of going into contempt of court. I mean, these are very serious things.
Well, he has a complaint outstanding with the Solicitors Regulatory Authority for branding someone a racist falsely. I don't know the full details of the case. I suspect, and I don't know, I suspect the Solicitors Regulatory Authority are not going to like him very much. I actually think, and I might be wrong, and if I'm insulting him, I apologise, I think he believes he's going to be struck off and is looking for a future career.
Well, his future career was into politics. Like, he came third in the West Midlands mayoral election with 70,000 votes. That's not something to sniff at. This guy is a political animal.
Yeah.
I mean, he was hitting all the right buttons. He said he was on a crusade for Allah to quieten
Hang on, you can't have a crusade.
Yeah. I know, yeah. I know. He was there to challenge the Zionists. He was hitting every mark, and I think in his head he thought, if I could be the one to, take on Greater Manchester Police, and we could pick up all this race stuff, that would be his platform to then kind of build a political career. He ran against Shabnam Mahmood.
But won't he say, Pete,
election,
if he does get struck off, won't he say it's because he stood up for the Muslim community?
Yeah, it doesn't
and he'll
matter.
turn this into... Because one of the things that I found incredibly frustrating about this whole Manchester Airport incident was the way that immediately it turned into a race thing.
Immediately.
And basically, it was just a group of idiots who'd creamed the police, and then the police responded.
Yeah, and it was an attempt to kind of recreate a sort of Black Lives Matter thing in Manchester out of the event. And yet, you could see from the footage that was released later on, there are two sides to this story. And Andy Burnham said that right on the beginning.
I couldn't believe we had somebody on one of my other shows from the Police Federation and said, look, if you pull the police officer's gun out, he can do whatever he wants. Yeah. Therefore, that police officer is not guilty of professional misconduct.
There was a lot of violence in a very short period of time that we could see. And that needs to be picked apart carefully.
I have to say that Richard Tice and Lee Anderson came out very quickly defending the policeman.
Okay, so I have my problems with that.
But I have too, because I didn't like what I saw, and I had a different opinion with Lee and Richard because they're good friends of mine. I'm in the same party as them. But the thing is, I hadn't seen the other.
See, I don't think the other bit of the video makes a difference.
Danielle Nichols, who obviously presents with me on Saturday night, her point was, hot-headed person, probably not a great guy to have
Exactly.
a gun.
And that's
You need to be able to stay
what
calm
this issue
in
is.
exactly that's it.
Yeah.
That's the situation
I
you're
agree.
trained for.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but when Lee said on Twitter something like, "Oh, the Great British Public will give this guy a medal or something," I was like, "No, they won't." I actually think that what some of the, and I think, was it Rupert Lowe? I think he stepped into this. I think they wandered into an argument very dangerously here, and I actually think Nigel missed a trick where he should have said, no. We let the courts handle this. We let the investigation.
That's my position.
Yeah, and I think they missed a trick there.
But I
actually,
think
to actually look like sensible, real politicians.
But the red mist descended on the man. Because
Yeah.
obviously the girl was actually smashed apart, broken nose. You saw the picture.
Yeah.
And you saw her thrown to the ground and everything.
Oh, I knew as soon as that first video was released that there would be a furore over it.
Yeah.
But I remember saying, I watched it with a friend, and I remember I turned to him and I said, I would have seen 4 seconds before that happened.
Yeah.
Because we all
You
know.
must have a great life.
I know, yeah.
He's sat at home going, let's watch that video. I'll tell you what I'd like is to see 4 seconds.
Is the
before.
pizza ready?
Yeah.
So like in the Barnes household, is the chewing the fat? Is that what goes on?
Sometimes there is, yeah. When I'm back with my parents, yeah. But where I was at the time, I was just with a couple of friends, and it just popped up on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was like, "Guys, you've got to see this," because, like you said, it was a lot of violence in a short amount of time, and we all know that, like the old line I think you say is that if it bleeds, it leads. Yeah. So, like, you know, I knew the reaction was going to be swift.
By the way, my favourite detail that you've ever given me is, and I don't know if I've got this quite right, but when you go back to oral, there's just one bloke in the pub who goes, "It's a TV star."
Yeah.
Just finishes his ale.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so Akhmed Yakoob, is he going to be on Law and Order? Is it true or is it false?
I can't believe ITV would have swooped in that quickly into this situation. So I think it has to be false.
It is, in fact, false. Okay, to Pete. Staff at a hospital in Walsall have been told to admit they have what as part of a new training scheme?
Well, this story is incredibly sinister. This is the embodiment of be kind or else. So what it's white privilege.
Wow.
This is a story of a diversity training at the West Midlands, I think it's West Midlands Trust, and they basically have to admit that that the white people have a privilege over everybody else. And if you don't, it's mandatory. If you don't do it, then I presume you're going to get fired or whatever. You know, there will be consequences to it. This is really dark and really sinister because, you have
to admit you're a bad person.
Yes, that's the point. You have to admit that somehow you're a bad person. It's incredibly racist because this
struggle session.
But this is the point: is the person is a whistleblower that's come forward, and I think is incredibly brave, and they shouldn't have to do it, but. They said that they're not racist themselves, but they just don't want to admit that they have a privilege over people that they don't feel they have. Yeah. And because you have to remember now, it's not enough not to condemn racism. You have to be anti-racist, and that means accepting all of this.
But can't you just self-define yourself as a black person, or indeed a Vietnamese boat person?
Well, you know,
it's all self-defining.
You can be whatever you want on it.
In the National Union of Students, you could. I can't believe I'm about to say this. You could define yourself as a black student on the grounds you're Irish. Oh. Because they were oppressed. Or can you imagine, here he is, the chairman of the black students, Andre Walker. It's unbelievable.
When this sort of thing happens, you realise just how far culturally we've gone. This is actually happening.
Yes.
This struggle session that comes from 1960s China, effectively, is actually happening. And people are losing their jobs over it. If they say, no, I'm not going to do it, they get into trouble.
Well, that's where political correctness, it is a Soviet idea. It is there to get political ideas and other ideas out of society.
But the curve of development, something that started as politeness in the 90s, the curve has just gone sort of hugely...
And as we said earlier, it's the amount of money in it. Let's be real, DEI is flooded with money, and there's people making a fortune out of it.
And useful idiots at the top as well.
Before we go any further, Tom, it might be a worthwhile moment to mention the disaster that was befallen the Free Speech Union in the form of the piece of legislation to protect free speech on campus has been thrown in the bin. We thought we'd got there.
We thought it was a done deal. So that the free speech, what's it called? The Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act was a done deal. It had royal assent a few months ago.
So it was passed.
It was passed.
Commons, Lords and monarchy.
Committees, all of that. It got watered down. It got cross-party support. Everything was in motion to start on the 1st of August. Right. So a couple of days ago.
Yes.
And It was stopped by Bridget Phillipson.
How is it stopped? How can you stop a piece of legislation?
She wrote into Parliament in a note to the Commons on their last.
She's the
education secretary.
Yeah, right, okay.
She wrote in a note that she's going to review it and potentially repeal it. So the reason she can do it is because of the power that the government actually has. The real live power you have if you have.
Yeah, there are
MPs.
quite often with legislation. The government can decide when to implement it. I think there's one piece of legislation that's 200 years old. It's to decide what day Easter Sunday is, and it has never been implemented.
Well, exactly. There are a lot of things that are just dormant, aren't there? And so effectively, she's kind of saying we're not going to bring this to life.
Yeah,
but do you see?
It's called activating legislation. Is what they call it.
I appreciate that this is a more light-hearted show, but I think it is worth asking.
Yeah.
Do you think that Keir Starmer will repeal it? Because it's not very controversial, is it?
It's not. Given what it's gone through, I don't see. But it was claimed it was too burdensome.
Right.
Well, who's actually carrying the burden?
Is that what she
at the
said
moment?
in the letter?
In the letter, it says it's the burden. You can see on the government website, you can see the note she sent. But what you can't see, or we certainly haven't found yet, is the letter she says she wrote to her colleagues, her MP colleagues. We haven't found a copy of that. But
all that happens is, if you restrict free speech on campus, you are named and shamed.
You're named and shamed, and you have a legal duty to support
that is the bit that I think Bridget
freedom.
Phillipson has probably been very heavily lobbied to repeal this act because of the legal responsibility that universities would have to carry. What annoyed me the most was certain groups, I think it was the Board of British Deputies, came out and said that this was the right move because it said it would bring anti-Semites onto campuses. And I thought, no, that's really short-sighted because it also means that, they have the right to stop people on their side of the argument coming on.
It's muddling up categories.
I don't mean to be awful, but let's be clear. The Board of Jewish Deputies, or whatever they're called, is no longer a non-political organisation.
No,
Unbelievably, given everything that's happened, they're factional Labour.
Oh, I completely agree.
Factional.
But we were shocked by this, Andre, and we're going to fight. We're currently
I'd love to see you in a fight.
Yeah.
A genuine, real, physical fight. I'm gone. I'm in a ball in the corner. But this kind of fight, I'm in for it.
Well, I have to say, I think the viewers and listeners are absolutely with you. I think what the Free Speech Union does is absolutely phenomenal. It's worth plugging it again because for £5 a month, you can get the protection from the Free Speech Union. What is it?
freespeechunion.org and just click on join.
Well, can I just pick up on one final point? This is a worrying trend that a lot of us have had about free speech in the new Labour government. Lisa Nandy, I think she's the new culture secretary, says the culture wars are over. And I found that quite chilling.
She's done that quite quickly.
Yeah, I know, it's quite impressive, really.
And meanwhile, they proceed with a culture war.
Because I know there's been a great argument about whether Islamophobia would move to be classed as a hate crime.
The APPG definition, the all-party parliamentary group definition.
And then a lot of this stuff would change. And whilst it may not seem like the biggest deal, what it is a restructuring of kind of what I've taken to call the pyramid of minorities and like who gets preference over this and all the rest of it. And whilst it's not really going to affect you in your pocket or all the rest of it, the long-term impact of this stuff is really important.
Absolutely. OK, well, look, we are going to move on simply because the APPG definition of of Islamophobia is a bit specialised. It's a bit specialised.
Have we gone very narrow down the end of the wedge?
As my school teacher always used to say, no, we're not going down Red Herring Road.
Yeah, Red Herring Road.
Turn left on White Elephant Way. OK, staff in Walsall, what have they had to admit?
White privilege.
It is absolutely right.
That was The Woke That Was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was The Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
I want to congratulate you for coming second in Dover and Deal at the general election. You are one of the people who didn't have a huge amount of time to campaign for reform, but actually did rather well.
Yeah, there were 11 candidates and the Labour won it. We expected to because he was campaigning for 2.5 years and I had 3.5 weeks. So
I've got to say to you, I think that the great strength of what Reform UK has done is not winning those 5 seats. It's the 98 second places. Well, yes, it is 5 seats. I know. Oh, absolutely. Right. How many seats did Reform get?
I think Less than 6.
Okay, how many seats did Reform?
4.
No! Right, just to remind everybody, Pete Barnes said he would dance in his underwear if Reform got 5 seats, and he's been arguing from that position that the traditional unionist voice does not count as a Reform UK MP.
Doesn't count. Doesn't count.
I'm sorry. Well, he's got the whip.
Yeah, still doesn't
So
count.
is he. Right.
Touché.
On Saturday.
Okay. And also, the other thing, of course, is that you did have a disappointment as well in the London elections.
Yeah, I lost my deposit there. I mean, I knew I wouldn't win there, but our aim was to get as many Assembly members on board. We only got 1, but it was the whole thing is corrupt. I've written to the Electoral Commission, in London, etc., to actually talk about the postal vote, because I've got incredible number of examples where people had 6 or 7 polling cards.
Yeah.
And they used them, and the postal vote.
What do you think went wrong with the election in London?
Well, Sadiq Khan won. That's what went wrong.
I mean, I find that extraordinary.
And he shouldn't be allowed to stand for more than 2 terms. This is his 3rd term in 12 years. I think that's undemocratic.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I do think it should be a 2-term job.
Yeah.
2-term job.
The policies I was standing on were loved by everyone.
But what Sadiq Khan has done, and I've seen this, there is now effectively ethnic and tribal voting. And what Sadiq will do is lean into that.
Yeah.
To say, there's the money for the Bengalis, there's the money for the gay community, there's the money for, well, I was going to say the Jewish community, but I think that's unlikely. Yeah.
But the centre of London obviously is very much Sadiq's home. Everything about him, what he's doing, etc. If you go to the donut where the ulez problem was, that went pretty much Conservative. So it went to thing. Reform UK had no chance of becoming mayor. But watch this space next time.
OK, well, look, the question is this. Chesterfield Pride has been criticised for operating a game in which children toss a milkshake at whom?
Well, obviously, I think this is a very serious point to actually come across it, because that milkshake could have contained acid which was thrown at Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
And that's the issue about this. And people were making light of it. Yes, a milkshake, we can have a laugh about it, a bit of slapstick and all that sort of thing. But I think actually the underlying aspect of this, I mean, I like laughing at things, I like satire, I like Monty Python, we talked about that earlier. All that.
So you like comedy and you like Monty Python?
Yes, yes, I'm afraid I do. Remember, I'm about twice your age. Be careful.
Twice? 3 times, Grandad.
Wouldn't you say there's a difference, though, between... I totally agree. We're living in an era where 2 MPs have died in recent years.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
And Nigel Farage, who would not have known what was in that milkshake. It could have been acid, it could have been some life-changing chemical. It was an appalling incident, and MPs need to be protected from that. But at a game where you're throwing something at a cartoon character, or you have an effigy of some... That's a different thing, isn't it?
That's very different.
Well, yes and no. I still think it's actually the whole point. Someone sat down in the organisation committee. What should we do to this thing? Let's have an effigy of Nigel Farage, and we'll throw a milkshake at
it. During the fireworks in Lewis, they had the effigy.
I know they do.
So they're...
Every year they have a different person. They have
different
Boris
person.
Johnson.
I maintain, and Pete's heard this before, so apologies for being repetitious, but I believe that throwing a milkshake at somebody should be a terrorism offence. And the reason is because I think what you're trying to do is exercise your personal veto. And I've also said, and people may disagree with me and accept that this is slightly more controversial, they throw milkshakes because they don't have Semtex. As far as I'm concerned, these people are terrorists.
Well, earlier in the week, I think last week, people like Tommy Robinson was arrested under a terrorist offence for showing a film, which he did break a court order. And I was supposed to go to that event, but that was 150,000 people supporting patriotism and that sort of thing.
I was on the big screen.
Well, you really?
Funnily enough, I'd interviewed somebody who got cancelled by the trans community. And they showed part of the interview. Danielle was on more than me in that particular segment. And she said, because normally, I'm the sidekick, aren't I? Because normally I'm the main one.
Well, she's much more attractive than you.
She is. Although I've got quite... Well, no. Mine are more hairy.
I just want to point out something here. What really annoys me is that this was done for an LGBT pride event. It was also done in coalition with Kick Racism and Football, or one of these anti-racist charities as well.
Yeah, okay.
And what annoys me is... many of the organisers think that they get a free pass because they're part of the gay community.
Yes.
You don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. These people would have kicked up God knows how much fuss if it was a drag performer, if it was a Labour MP, or if it was a trans performer, or somebody from their culture. They'd have gone mental.
Well, they should have had throw a milkshake at Sir Keir Starmer or something like that.
Oh,
if they're going to do Nigel Farage, of course they should.
Very much approve of the Ted Heath burning. Is that still going on? Since the 70s, ever since Ted Heath went into the European Union, they've been burning Ted Heath somewhere.
Where's that?
There is the Society of Ted Heath Burners.
Oh, God.
I'm not joking.
God, that is
I will Google that later.
People at home are going to go, he can't be telling the truth. But I think it's the Society of Ted Heath Burners. They're saying, oh.
But the point is that, you know, there are many, many issues in the LGBT community that they face. There's homelessness, mental health, there's drug addiction problems, there's all this stuff that really needs to be taken seriously.
How many of those have we all had?
However, the problem is, it's the people organising this stuff aren't serious people.
No,
that's my point.
And because
That's
they do
my point.
stupid stuff like this, actual issues that affect that community are not taken seriously.
Look, I've wandered past Pride festivals. I've never been involved in anything like that. But let's be honest, they're all just getting drunk.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not like... I mean, this suggestion... But I'll tell you what that makes me laugh about Pride festivals. It's like this new definition of bravery. Oh, you're so brave. Look, there you are in your leather underpants. Oh, it's so brave. And I think, why are we... I mean, normally you would applaud people for winning a battle. But these people are like, sort of wandering around. Well done. You dress up your partner as a dog. Congratulations.
So I went to London Pride. It was the first time I ever went this year. And I tell you now, Ollie, you're perfectly correct. It is just people getting drunk in the middle of the street on a Saturday after. Yeah, but the thing is, I don't need a festival to do that. I do that every weekend, if I'm being honest. Like, you are right. The Pride in this country is just a party. It's not a serious thing. And if they want these issues to be taken seriously, you have to be serious.
I've got to tell you something.
Serious.
I remember seeing a group of Christians with signs up going, "Pride is a sin," and I said, "I bet you a tenner it's not the worst sin being committed." If sin's what you're worried about,
we've got all 7 plus 5 more.
Pride will be low on the list. Okay, so who have they been throwing a milkshake at?
Nigel Farage.
Absolutely right.
That was the woke that was. Continues after the break. It's time for That Was the Woke That Was with Andre Walker.
Okay, to Tom. Elon Musk has criticised Google for wiping what from search engine answers?
Google's funny, isn't it? When you type things in, the number of things it comes up with. I've heard
if you put in the word Andre, it completes it as Andre Walker's wife.
Does it? I mean, exactly. The completion that Google comes up with.
The most Googled thing about presenters on Talk and other channels is like trying to get photos of like your wife or husband or girlfriend or whatever. And I'm convinced it's because people are going, "Oh, I'd have a crack at it."
I've had about 7 obituaries on Howard Cox. You know, you type that one in.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I always say it's brilliant. It's the great story of Alfred Nobel, who thought of himself as this great business leader, this great philanthropist. And when his obituaries came out, it was all about how he invented dynamite and actually one of the world's worst people responsible for 1 million people. But of course, the great story about this is he wasn't dead. It was a mistake. So he came up with that bogus Peace Prize so his name would always be associated with peace. I mean, that is just outrageous, isn't it?
Ridiculous.
But is it just me? I always triangulate now when I go to the internet, so I don't...
Do you? Do you really?
You have a go at what goes on in my house.
I don't just go to Google. I go to DuckDuck and I go to Bing and I go to other places.
Sorry. No, I'm not accepting this. Right.
What
you
is
search in various places. How is triangulating?
Is that I think of that as if I'm looking for a very specific thing.
Right.
I don't know. Say that the Olympic opening ceremony, which I know has been cut from some platforms. Right. Then there are ways of finding it. You don't just go to Google. You go other places, and you also change the wording.
What specialist material have you been seeking out recently? Oh, come on!
Somebody's laptop.
Nothing. Nothing at all.
Yeah, do you know what? I had a friend of mine who was a local councillor.
MI6.
I had a friend of mine who was a local councillor. What he didn't know was whenever he went out, his flatmates used to use his council laptop for pornography. And they said, in the end, when he had to return it, he said, we just had to steal it and throw it in the Thames. Because he was going to get into serious trouble.
No, but
with that crap that's on it.
Just to bring it back to the question, there is a serious bit of this, and that is the power of these giant tech companies and their influence on our politics. Let's not forget that we're coming up to a presidential election, and Silicon Valley gave huge amounts of money to Hillary Clinton, but they gave even more to Joe Biden. Now, what's quite interesting is when we look at who's
You're starting to hint and help Tom with this.
I'm trying to bring it back to the quiz. But
The what?
Do you remember why we're here, gents? But no, so what's interesting is there is a number of these kind of Silicon Valley billionaires that are starting to move to Trump. And that's starting to worry a lot of the Democrats. But Google seems to be very firmly still in the Democratic camp. And, you know, the fact that, like Elon is right to raise this, and it is a real issue.
Pete, I'm going to ask you this. Are you going to help Tom out? Because you know the answer, don't you?
I do know the answer.
But the only thing I was going to say...
No, change the subject.
I suspect that the assassination of Trump has been...
Absolutely right. OK, on to Pete. Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has called Kamala Harris a childless what?
Oh, God, he called her a childless cat lady.
And you didn't like that, did you?
No, I don't, because I think it's childish. I mean, this guy wants to be...
No, it isn't.
Yeah, there's quite a lot about this guy. I have to admit, I don't know, but he just seemed to have lived somewhat of an interesting life. And he just... At first, I thought he seemed like quite a sensible pick from Donald Trump, but... I think the way he's going about this is a real liability. I think attacking Kamala Harris personally, like he has been doing, I think will rally the base in some areas, but I think there will be a lot of kind of independent, more middle-of-the-road voters that won't like it.
The next surname J.D. Vance should have is And Coke.
And
so you could be called J.D. and Coke. That'd be superb, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but
ad hominem attacks, I was always told that when you're actually attacking someone personally,
Yeah.
you've lost the argument.
Yeah, you've lost the argument.
You're not taking the substance.
I don't really see the point of it particularly.
Yeah.
No, I like I say, it's why I call it childish, because there are real criticisms of Kamala Harris. Like she was terrible on the border issue. You know, let's not forget she was called the border czar. Although if you ask liberal press in America, she never had that job. Like I found it fascinating how all of the networks moved and said, "Oh, that's just what Republicans called it." No, Joe Biden called her that.
Yeah, but he doesn't remember.
He doesn't remember saying it.
He's like, I've always said the way to get rid of Joe Biden is just tell him he's the president of North Korea and give him a plane.
Yeah.
He'll be convinced. He'll be in Pyongyang.
Well,
As long as it's not an Olympic person, he might end up in South Korea by mistake.
The interesting thing is, one of the reasons that, you know, obviously they had to get rid of Joe Biden is because he can't form a sentence. Kamala Harris has had her own moments of mumbling nonsense where she's not said anything.
Yeah. There's often no substance. She talks a lot about Venn diagrams.
Oh, she loves
does
Venn
like
diagram.
Venn diagrams.
I'm with her on that. I feel like she learned about them one day and then she's just become obsessed. It's become her thing.
My favourite was Dan Quayle, who came back from South America, and he said, I've enjoyed my trip to Latin America. It's just a shame I couldn't speak Latin and was unable to converse with them. Interesting.
Yeah. And he miseducated some primary school children with the word potato.
Potato, he thought it was toe. Potato.
Yeah, with an E on the end.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's rumours.
There were some low points for him.
There's some rumours that J.D. Vance might not be running as his running mate. He might be dropped.
Yeah, and I think the rumours circulating around some of his other extracurricular activities.
Because he's a novelist, isn't he?
Yeah, and there's lots of other things. It just seems to be...
Something's going wrong there.
And I think... Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Get Meghan. Come on, get Meghan and Harry. Come on, get them.
The one thing that the GOP, the Republicans, had going for them is they were like solidly unified. You know, they were one track, they were one party, one voice, and now they suddenly have to drop him. They look just as chaotic as the Democrats. And the one thing I will give to the Democrats, and I think I've said this before, is the tone of the Democratic kind of campaign and movement changed dramatically when Kamala Harris became the nominee. You know, they sort of became more serious.
Can she win?
Yes.
Will she win?
Oh, I'm thinking at the moment, yes. Only because
it's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot. It really has.
It's going to be close.
I think it's going to be a lot closer.
I know what you're about to say to me. He's not dancing in his pants now or ever.
Ever.
Pete, I'm not putting that to you. I just know, we'll just get into that mess again. I'll have Tice on the phone again.
Yeah.
I'll have Farage on the phone again. I mean, I'd never known that Richard Tice and Nigel Farage wanted to watch men dance in their underwear until...
It can be arranged.
It is a surprise.
It can't.
OK, so what did he call her?
He called her a cat lady.
He did, in fact, call her a cat lady. That's absolutely right. OK, well, that is the end of the quiz, and this is our wonderful prize. And I have to say, I think our winner tonight has to be Howard Cox. But, Howard, the community that you ran for at the general election is two places, isn't it? It's Dover and Deal. So... there you go. That's for Dover and that's for Deal.
And that's
very
the deal.
much.
And I was going to do exactly the same thing. Can I do some more? Because I've got to join it.
I'll tell you what
do you
we'll
want to join in?
I'll tell you what we'll do. As we say goodbye to everyone, in the final credits, we'll destroy Sadiq's book. There you go. Go on. Thank you very much. I will see you next time. Until then, goodbye.